Hello friends, welcome back to the course Current Regulatory Requirement for Conducting Clinical Trial in India. So this is lecture 5. In this lecture we are going to see guidelines relevant to clinical trials and new drug. So in this lecture we are going to see the different guidelines, that is guidelines from DBT, then guideline from ICMR, then what is GCP, then what are the guidelines for ethics committee which are developed by the ICMR, what are the guidelines for bioavailability, bioequivalence studies, guidelines which are developed by CDSCO prior 2013 and guidelines which are developed by CDSCO after 2013. So the learning objective of this lecture: upon completion of this lecture, the participant will be able to understand the basics of the guidance document issued by the regulatory authority, that is a CDSCO, we have seen it, and the expert bodies like ICMRs, DBT, the guidelines related to the subject clinical trial new drug in India. The learner will be able to understand what is good clinical practice and why the compliance is required, what is the aim of the good clinical practice, what is the tenet of this GCP. Will be able to understand where to find out these guidelines. For example, BAB studies are there, then the other guidelines like GCP, stem cells. So where these guidelines are available, that would be understood. And which guideline to be followed. Many of the time there is a confusion whether to follow the BAB studies guideline or clinical trial guideline. So after having this lecture, you will be able to understand which guideline to be followed. Then there is one handbook of clinical trial. You will be understand what is that handbook. So let us start with the introduction of good clinical practices for clinical research in India. So good clinical practice is an ethical and scientific quality standard for designing, conducting and recording trials that involve the participation of human subjects. Whichever the trials wherein the human participants are there, we call it as a clinical trial. We have seen it, and if there are animals, then it is a preclinical. So the good clinical practice, it is a ethical and scientific quality standard. Compliance with this standard provides assurance to the public. So if one has followed this good clinical practice while conducting the clinical trial, then it will provide assurance to the public that the right, safety and well-being of the participant, that is a study subject, has been protected, and that whatever the data they have from this research, that data is credible and reliable. GCP, as I have said, is a set of guidelines for biomedical studies which encompasses the design, conduct, termination, audit, analysis, reporting and documentation of the studies involving human subject. The fundamental tenet of GCP is that in research on human subject, the interests of science and society should never take precedence over consideration related to the well-being of the study subject. So the well-being of the study subject is at high priority, and the science and society, that should not take the precedence of it. The aim of this good clinical practice: to ensure that the studies are scientifically and ethically sound, and that the clinical properties of the pharmaceutical substances, that is we call it as investigational substance also, IP, under investigation are properly documented. The guideline seeks to establish two cardinal principles. There are two main principles. First is the protection of the right of human subjects and authenticity of biomedical data generated. So these are the two basic principles. Based on that, many principles are developed by the GCP guidelines. It has been widely recognized that India offers unique opportunities for conducting clinical trial in view of the large patient pool, then well-trained and experienced investigator and premier medical institute available in the country, along with considerable low per patient trial cost as compared to the developed countries. That's why the clinical trials are more in the India. However, a need was felt to develop our own Indian guidelines. So these are some of the guidelines. They are developed by WHO, then ICH. But the India need to develop guidelines which are suitable for the Indian population. So that need felt to develop guidelines to ensure uniform quality of clinical research throughout the country and to generate data for registration for new drug before use in the Indian population. For that, an expert committee set up by the CDSCO, that is the central government, in consultation with clinical expert, and they have formulated the GCP guidelines for generation of clinical data on a drug. The history of GCP statute traces back to one of the oldest enduring tradition in the history of medicine, that is the Hippocratic Oath. As the guideline ethical code, it is primarily known for its edict to do no harm to the patients. So that was the main principle, to do no harm to the patient. However, the complexities of modern medicine research necessitate a more elaborate set of guidelines that address a physician's ethical and scientific responsibilities, such as obtaining informed consent form or disclosing risks while involved in biomedical research. So these guidelines have been evolved with the consideration of WHO, ICH, US FDA, EU guideline, that is European Good Clinical Practice guideline, and also the ethical guidelines for the biomedical research on human subject issued by the ICMR. So they should be followed for carrying out all biomedical research in India at all stages of drug development, whether prior to subsequent to product registration in India. So let us see which are these guidelines. So guideline issued by CDSCO before 2013, good clinical practices guideline for clinical trial on pharmaceutical product in India by CDSCO, December 2001. In the year of 2009, we have seen that clinical trial registry. Then guidance for industry on submission of clinical trial application for evaluating safety and efficacy. So in this there is a requirement for permission of new drug approval. What are the requirements that has been given? Post approval changes, if there are after the approval of the trial and after approval of the marketing authorization, if there is a changes, then what are the changes, how they have to be applied regarding that post approval changes in biological products, the guideline mentions. Then preparation of the quality information for drug submission for new drug approval. So this has also been uploaded in 2008. Guidelines for BA/BE study. This guideline, though it is exclusively given for the bioavailability and bioequivalence studies, this guideline should be read in conjunction with the Schedule Y, because Schedule Y is having the more specific information about the clinical trial. Also the GCP guideline and ethical guideline for biomedical research on human subject by ICMR. So this specific guideline with respect to the bioavailability and bioequivalence is there. This was hosted in 2005. The next is guidance for industry. The draft guidance, that is for the preparation of CTD for import, manufacture and marketing of approval of new drug for human use. So this was posted in 2010. Further, the draft guidance requirement for permission of fixed dose combination. There was confusion regarding the fixed dosage combination, whether new drug or old drug, whether require clinical trial or not. For that, the draft guidance has been published on the website, that is a requirement for permission of FDC. Draft guidance for issuance of NOC for export of new drug. So the export of new drug whether it is approved, unapproved, banned, for that the draft guidance is there on the site, which was posted on May 2011. Draft guidance requirement of chemical and pharmaceutical information including stability study data before approval of clinical trial BA/BE studies, posted on December 2011. So what are the data is required with respect to the chemical and pharmaceutical, including stability study? So whatever the data that has been given in this guideline. Draft guidance, that is requirement for determining quantum of financial compensation to be paid in case of clinical trial related injury or death. This is there in the site and it has been posted in August 2012. Then the draft guidance 2018. So this is exclusively for the bioavailability bioequivalence study for the purpose of only export. Some of the guidelines issued after 2013, as we have seen in many lectures. 2013 was the landmark in this year, and after this there has been many changes in the Drug and Cosmetic Act and rules. So some of the guidelines are published. These are like this. So the draft guidance on AV recording of informed consent process in clinical trial. So this is published in Jan 2014. This talks about the audio video recording. We have seen it is required for the vulnerable population and for new chemical entity. So all these things regarding how to record and what are the criteria, this is given in this draft guidance. National guideline for stem cell research. This has been given by the ICMR in 2017. So all the types of stem cells and the bodies involved, how to apply, where to apply, that has been mentioned in this guideline. These are the national guidelines. Guideline on similar biologics. So biosimilar, after the biological there were the guidelines for the biologics that we called the biosimilar. For the guideline on similar biologics, that is regulatory requirement for marketing authorization in India. So this guideline was developed by DBT and CDSCO and now it has been revised in 2016, which is available in our site. Then handbook for application and reviewers of clinical trial of new drug in India. So one book has also been, web version is available in our site. That book is also related to the clinical trials guideline. This has been published in January 2017. Guidelines specifying the procedure for payment of compensation to the subject of clinical trial in case of injury or death. So these are the guidelines related to the compensation clause, how to reimburse, give the compensation in case of the injury or death. So this is given in 2015. Then guideline for formula to determine the quantum of compensation in case of SAE of death occurring during clinical trial. So there are three formulas in case of death, in case of injury, in case of serious adverse event. So these formulas, how to formulate, how to put the values, that is given in this guideline. Then guideline regarding the ethics committee registration. So what are the composition, who should be the member, who should be the chairman, that is given in the guideline, that is registration for ethics committee. So this was published by CDSCO in Feb 2013. Then draft guidance document for medical device by IPC, that is Indian Pharmacopoeia Commission. They have published a draft guidance for the medical devices. Guideline for application processing by official in new medical devices by CDSCO. So this guideline has been developed by the CDAC. CDAC is a team which is available in CDSCO and they are involved in making all the applications online. So likewise they have made the medical device application and approval is also online. So how to apply, what are the precautions to be taken, how to register, how to apply. So they have developed the guidelines in this regard. So as I have mentioned, these all are available in our website. So the website for this is, earlier it was cdsco.nic.in. Now we have developed a new web portal, that is www.cdsco.gov.in. So most of the guidelines are available and those guidelines which are not available, that will be available soon on this website. So let us have a quick recap with the questions as usual. So the first question, What are guidelines? So the guidelines are the details of relevant rule for stakeholders prepared by the expert bodies. The second question, in which year the national guideline for stem cell research developed and by whom? So you have to tell the who has developed the guideline and in which year for the stem cells. So the answer is the national guideline for stem cell research have been developed by ICMR and it is in 2017. Then the next question is, what is the full form of CTD? So CTD is a common technical document. The next question, that is, what is good clinical practice? We have seen in the second slide. So GCP is an ethical and scientific quality standard for designing, conducting, recording, reporting of the clinical trial that involve the human participation. So let us summarize briefly in lecture 5 what we have learned about. So in this lecture we have seen the different guidelines developed by DBT, developed by ICMR, developed by CDSCO, the guidelines before 2013, the guidelines after 2013, then the guideline for biosimilar product, then guideline for stem cell product, then guideline for good clinical practice. There are the guideline for the compensation, then the formula, how to report the assaying. So we have seen almost all the guidelines and guidance document developed for the industry and stakeholders. So this is all about this lecture. Thank you for your kind attention. We'll see in next lecture. Till then, bye bye, all the best.